Have you ever been told, without a single word, that you don't belong? Imagine stepping into a space you've earned, a space you were invited to, only to be judged and shamed because of the color of your skin. That's what happened to 12-year-old Malik Johnson, a boy who had worked tirelessly for his seat in first class. But on this flight, one woman decided she had the right to strip him of his dignity. Here's the question: what would you do if it were your child? Would you speak up when the room falls silent? Or would you look away, pretending not to see? Because on this flight, choices mattered. One woman's prejudice clashed with a boy's quiet strength, and the truth that unfolded left the entire cabin stunned. If you were sitting there, would you have stood with Malik, or let him stand alone? Stay with me as we walk through this story of pain, courage, and an unforgettable twist that no one on that plane ever saw coming. And before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can join us in reflecting on stories that challenge us, heal us, and remind us of our shared humanity. The hum of jet engines was steady in the background, blending with the faint shuffle of passengers finding their seats. It was an early morning flight from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., the kind of flight where business travelers skim through their emails and families settle children with snacks and tablets. Overhead bins clicked shut as attendants reminded people to stow their belongings. Among the steady current of travelers was a boy who walked with quiet purpose, a backpack hanging slightly loose on his shoulders. His name was Malik Johnson, 12 years old, skinny, but with the upright posture of someone older. His face held both curiosity and discipline. In his hands, he carried a thick mathematics book, its spine cracked from constant use. The title read, Advanced Number Theory. Not a typical read for a middle schooler, but Malik was not a typical boy. He stopped at seat 2B, a window seat in the first-class cabin. He had memorized the number from the boarding pass, which he now tucked carefully into his book for safekeeping. The seat felt larger than life, the kind of wide leather seat he had only seen in commercials. He set his backpack down, opened his math book, and began reading, lips moving silently as his finger traced a line of equations. As passengers streamed in, a woman in her mid-40s halted abruptly in the aisle. She was well-dressed, pearl earrings gleaming, her blonde hair tucked in a perfect bun. Her name, though Malik did not yet know it, was Karen Whitmore. She stopped at row 2, narrowed her eyes, and her voice sliced through the cabin's hum. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "You're in my seat." Malik looked up, startled, but kept his voice even. "No, ma'am. This is seat 2B. That's what's on my ticket." Karen tilted her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Sweetheart, first-class seats aren't usually given to children traveling alone. I think you must be mistaken. Let me see your ticket." Malik hesitated, clutching his math book. "I'm not mistaken," he said softly. "I belong here." The cabin grew a little quieter, as though the words hung heavier than they should. A businessman across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A young couple paused mid-conversation. Karen's tone sharpened. "Look, let's not make a scene. These seats cost good money. And I don't think She stopped short, eyes scanning him up and down, her expression tightening. The type of passenger meant for this section. The words landed like stones. Malik felt them in his chest, a familiar sting, though he had done nothing wrong. He closed his book carefully, slid the boarding pass out, and held it up. 2B. That's what it says. But Karen barely glanced at it. "This is ridiculous." "Flight attendant," she called out, her voice louder now, carrying over the rows. A nearby attendant approached, eyes flicking between the woman and the boy. Her practiced smile wavered as she realized this was not a typical seating mix-up. "Ma'am, let's just take a look at your ticket," she said gently. Karen handed hers over with a triumphant huff. "C2B," the attendant frowned. "Comparing tickets? Actually, ma'am, your ticket says 2C, the aisle seat." The color rose in Karen's face, but instead of stepping back, she stiffened. "That can't be right. I always book the window seat, and even if it is, I'm not sitting next to him." Gas stirred from a few passengers nearby. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Malik sat frozen, heat rushing to his cheeks. His fingers dug into the edge of his math book, knuckles pale. From a few rows back, an elderly voice rang clear. "He has every right to be there." Heads turned to see Margaret O'Connor, a retired school teacher with white hair tucked beneath a faded blue hat. Her voice was steady, seasoned with years of standing up in classrooms. "That boy is where his ticket says he belongs. You let him be." Karen shot her a look, half disbelief, half annoyance. "Mind your own business." But the air had shifted. People were watching now, eyes narrowing not at the boy, but at the woman making a scene. Still, Karen refused to back down. She leaned toward Malik, lowering her voice but not her bite. "You don't belong here, and you know it. These seats are for people who've earned them." Malik swallowed hard. The words pressed into the soft place where his pride and his fear collided. He thought of his father's advice. Hold your head high, even when the world tries to push it down. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers without flinching. "I did earn it," he said simply, "with my work, with who I am." The moment stretched. The engines thrummed. The passengers waited, and the boy in seat 2B sat straighter, book in his lap, heart pounding but unbroken. And though the story was only beginning, the cabin already knew something significant had just happened in row 2. The flight attendants finally moved down the aisle, coaxing passengers into their seats. The incident in row 2 had left the air charged, but Malik Johnson did what he always did. When the world pressed too close, he lowered his eyes to his book. He let numbers and symbols comfort him like old friends. For Malik, numbers had always made more sense than people. They didn't look at his skin and judge. They didn't whisper in aisles or pull him aside with suspicious eyes. Numbers simply were, and they opened doors in his mind that no insult could shut. But Malik wasn't on this flight by accident. He was traveling to Washington, D.C., to represent his school at a national mathematics competition, one that would bring together the most talented middle school students from across the United States. Winning wasn't everything his parents had reminded him often of that, but Malik had a quiet fire in him. He wanted to prove, to himself and to the world, that brilliance had no color code. At home in Atlanta, Malik's world was steadier, though not free of challenges. The Johnson family lived in a brick 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of the city. The home was filled with books, mathematics texts, history volumes, novels with dog-eared pages. His mother, Angela Johnson, a respected cardiologist at Emory Hospital, kept a strict routine. She insisted that Malik eat breakfast every morning, usually scrambled eggs and toast measured out with care. "The brain needs fuel," she would say, pouring him a glass of orange juice. Angela was more than a doctor. She was Malik's compass. She understood what it meant to push against limits. In her own medical career, she had faced doubters, people who assumed she was a nurse, not the surgeon in charge. She never forgot those moments, and she carried the sting of them into her parenting. "Malik," she often said, "you'll face voices that try to tell you where you don't belong. Don't let them write your story." His father, David Johnson, carried a different kind of history. He had grown up in Birmingham, Alabama, in a house where the roof leaked when it rained and the heat often sputtered out in winter. He remembered the sharp bite of cold mornings, pulling on second-hand shoes to walk to school. He remembered teachers who told him not to aim too high, but David had aimed high anyway. After graduating top of his class in business school, he had clawed his way through the airline industry, often the only black executive in the room. He had faced closed doors, sideways comments, and the endless need to prove himself twice over. In time, he had become the CEO of Skyjet Airlines, a position that was both a triumph and a daily test. At the dinner table, David rarely spoke about his title. Instead, he spoke about responsibility. Airlines aren't just planes, he told Malik once. They're bridges. They carry people across divides, and every passenger deserves dignity, no matter their seat number. Those words settled into Malik's bones. Still, he sometimes wondered what it meant to carry his father's shadow. At school, kids whispered, "That's the kid whose dad owns an airline." Teachers treated him with a mixture of admiration and expectation. Malik longed to be known for his own achievements, not just the name on his report card. That was why the math competition mattered so much. It was his own field, his own battle, his own seat earned without his father's power. The Johnsons prepared carefully for the trip. Angela packed Malik's clothes in neat rows, sliding in his best navy blazer and a pair of polished loafers. Malik tucked in his math notebook, pages scribbled with equations, and the lucky pencil he had carried through every test. David had wanted to fly him on a private jet, to shield him from the unpredictability of commercial flights, but Malik insisted on flying with the other competitors. "I want to do this like everyone else," he told his father. "No shortcuts." David respected that, even if it made him uneasy. So here Malik sat, in 2B, his small frame almost swallowed by the leather seat. He had insisted on carrying his own backpack through security. He had walked the jet bridge with steady steps, and now, with Karen Whitmore's words still hanging in the air, he felt both the weight of his independence and the sting of its cost. Karen, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably in 2C. She scrolled on her phone, pretending indifference, but her cheeks burned. She had not expected the scene to draw so many eyes, nor the intervention of Margaret O'Connor. The older woman's calm authority had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Margaret, for her part, leaned back in her seat, recalling days long past when she had stood in classrooms teaching children who marched in protests after school. Her voice had carried in different fights, and she felt a familiar pulse of history in the confrontation she had just witnessed. The plane taxied out toward the runway, sunlight glinting off its wings. Passengers settled. Conversations resumed in quieter tones, but the air carried a new awareness. Malik opened his math book again, though his eyes lingered on the same line. He thought of his father waiting a few rows back, reading a newspaper with measured calm. He thought of his mother, who had hugged him twice before he left, whispering, "Remember, you're not just carrying yourself, you're carrying dignity." Numbers blurred on the page. Malik inhaled, exhaled, and pressed his hand against the leather armrest. This was more than a seat. It was a statement. The jet engines roared softly as the plane rolled toward the runway. But inside the first-class cabin, the tension was louder than any machine. Conversations hushed. Phones angled discreetly. eyes shifting between Malik Johnson in 2B and the woman in cream silk sitting beside him in 2C. Karen Whitmore had never been told no without consequences. For 42 years she had floated on the cushion of privilege, convinced she could size up the world with a glance. And now, in this gleaming cabin, she felt something rising in her, a mixture of indignation and disbelief that a boy could sit beside her, silent, brown-skinned, absorbed in a textbook as if he belonged. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. "Listen, sweetheart," she whispered, voice pitched just high enough for the man across the aisle to hear. "I don't know how you got this ticket, but this is first class. Maybe you should let the flight attendant find you a seat where you'd be more comfortable." Malik looked up, his dark eyes steady though his heart thudded. He remembered his mother's voice. "Don't let them write your story." He held his boarding pass between two fingers, extending it politely. "This is my seat. Ma'am, 2B. Karen barely glanced at the ticket, waving her manicured hand. "Mistakes happen. Or maybe someone gave you the wrong one." She smiled, the kind of smile that hit a blade. Passengers shifted. The man across the aisle, gray hair, navy suit, pretended to check his watch but leaned closer. A woman 2 rows back angled her phone just so, red record light glowing faintly. Malik's throat tightened. He wanted to disappear into numbers, into certainty. But there was no equation to solve here, only eyes, heavy on him. From row 4, Margaret O'Connor's voice cut through, clear, calm, aged like oak. "The boy already told you. Ma'am, that's his seat. Leave him be." Karen turned, startled. The older woman's hair was white, her cardigan simple, but her eyes held something unyielding. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice sharper now. "You heard me." Margaret folded her hands over her lap. "You're picking on a child who has every right to be here." Whispers stirred like wind. Karen's cheeks flushed. "This has nothing to do with him being a child. I just know what kind of passengers usually sit up here." The words hung like smoke. Everyone knew what she meant. Malik's hands trembled, but he pressed them flat on his lap. He would not cry. Not here. He lifted his chin, though his voice came out smaller than he wanted. "I studied hard for this. I earned this ticket." Karen laughed softly, bitterly. "Earned, sweetheart. Children don't buy seats like this. Not unless their fathers are." She paused, searching for the right stereotype, one sharp enough to cut. Athletes, rappers, that sort of thing. A hush fell, deeper than before. Malik's chest ached. He thought of his father a few rows back, of his mother's steady hands tying his tie that morning. He thought of every night bent over books while his friends played ball. And here, in the space he had dreamed of, his existence was reduced to a cruel guess. The flight attendant, a tall black man named Marcos, stepped forward, his voice practiced but firm. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Karen said quickly, relief washing her tone. "This child is in the wrong seat. I fly Skyjet all the time, and I've never." Marcus raised his scanner, eyes calm but intent. "Boarding pass. Please." Malik handed his over without hesitation. The scanner beeped. "Seat 2B, first class. Paid in full." Marcus turned to Karen. "Everything's correct. Now please, take your seat so we can prepare for takeoff." Karen blinked. "No. Check again. There has to be an error. I want to see the manifest." Marcus's patience strained. "Ma'am, there's no error." Karen's voice sharpened, cutting through the quiet. "This is about standards, about keeping first class. First class." Gas rippled. Phones tilted higher. Margaret O'Connor leaned forward, her voice trembling with fury, held steady by decades of practice. "You sound exactly like the people who told my students they didn't belong in good schools. And you're just as wrong." Karen turned scarlet. "This isn't about race." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Malik's small voice carried across the silence. "It is when you make it about race." A man in row 1 clapped once, sharply, then stopped, embarrassed. But the gesture had already landed. Marcus drew a line in the sand. "Ma'am, I'll need your boarding pass." Karen fumbled in her purse, producing it with an angry flourish. Marcus scanned it, then lifted his brows. "Your seat is 7C, still first class, but not this one." The humiliation struck her harder than turbulence. She glanced at Malik, then at Margaret, then at the rows of watching eyes. She had thought she could put him in his place. Instead, she felt the walls of her own narrowing. Malik sat still, chest rising and falling, his knuckles white against the armrest. He wanted to feel relief, but something else pulsed in him, a quiet anger. Not loud or sharp, but heavy, the kind that settled deep. David Johnson folded his newspaper in row 5. He had been silent, watching, waiting. He had wanted to see if strangers would stand for his son, if dignity could rise without his name attached. But Malik's trembling shoulders told him the waiting had gone on long enough. He rose, his presence filling the aisle. The cabin shifted with him, every gaze snapping to the tall man in the tailored charcoal suit. His voice came calm, steady, each word precise. "That boy you've been harassing is my son." And the aisle, for a heartbeat, became a stage. When David Johnson rose from his seat in row 5, the quiet was instant. It wasn't just his height or the cut of his suit. It was the gravity he carried, as if the air itself recognized him before anyone else did. Karen Whitmore turned, expecting another passenger come to her defense, but when her eyes met David's, she faltered. His gaze was calm, but it carried an edge that reminded her of steel hidden beneath velvet. "That boy," David said again, his voice steady, measured, unshakable, "is my son." The words rippled through the cabin like a sudden change in altitude. A woman in row 3 covered her mouth. Phones tilted higher. Margaret O'Connor exhaled softly, relief and vindication flickering in her tired eyes. Karen blinked, her cheek still flushed with defiance. "Your son," she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Well, that explains it. You must have saved up. Or maybe you're just playing dress-up in that suit." The insult floated, brittle, like glass about to shatter. David didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across both Karen and Malik. "No," he said. "I didn't save up. I didn't borrow or beg. I bought this ticket the way I buy everything in this cabin, with the authority of ownership." Karen frowned, confusion tugging at her mouth. "Ownership. My name is David Johnson," he continued, his tone low but carrying through the cabin with absolute clarity. "I'm the CEO and majority owner of Skyjet Airlines. This aircraft, these uniforms, even the seat you're so concerned about, all of it belongs to the company I lead." The silence that followed was electric. For a moment, even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, words scattering like startled birds. "That's impossible. You're lying." David reached into his pocket, tapping his phone. Within seconds, Marcus's device pinged with a confirmation message from the flight deck. The flight attendant's eyes widened. "Captain Simmons asked me to extend his personal greetings." "Mr. Johnson," And as if rehearsed, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've just been informed that our CEO, Mr. David Johnson, is traveling with us today. Mr. Johnson, on behalf of the crew, welcome aboard." A murmur swept through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, another! It's real!" Karen's face drained of color. The certainty that had carried her through a lifetime of unchecked remarks began to crumble. She glanced around, searching desperately for someone, anyone, to agree with her. But the cabin had already chosen sides. Malik sat straighter, his small shoulders pulling back, a mixture of relief and awe flickering in his eyes. For a heartbeat, he wasn't just a boy with a boarding pass. He was the son of the man who owned the sky above them. Karen stammered, I didn't know." "No," David said softly, but firmly. "You didn't know, and that's the point, isn't it? You saw a black child in first class and assumed he didn't belong. You tried to strip away his dignity in front of strangers. You tried to make him small." His hand rested gently on Malik's shoulder. "But this boy, he's brilliant. He studies harder than most adults work. He's on his way to represent his school at a national mathematics competition. He belongs here more than your prejudice ever will." The words landed like a gavel. Karen's hands trembled as she clutched her handbag. I didn't mean. You meant every word," Malik said suddenly, his voice soft but clear. The cabin leaned in. "You meant it when you said I didn't belong. You meant it when you guessed what my dad must do for a living. You meant it when you laughed." Karen flinched. The boy's steady gaze pierced deeper than David's authority ever could. Margaret O'Connor spoke next, her voice carrying the weight of years. "And you made it about race the moment you opened your mouth. Dear, don't pretend otherwise. I've seen this too many times to mistake it for anything else. Phones recorded openly now. Dozens of lenses captured Karen's red cheeks, Malik's steady composure, David's unyielding presence." The moment was already halfway to becoming a headline. Marcus stepped forward. "Sir," he said quietly to David, "company policy allows removal of any passenger who harasses another, especially a minor. At the captain's discretion, of course." David's eyes never left Karen. "And what about harassment rooted in racial prejudice?" "That," Marcus replied, "is a federal offense." The words landed like thunder. Karen gasped. "Wait, you can't. This was a misunderstanding. I was just concerned." David's expression softened only slightly. "Concern looks very different. Ms. Whitmore, what you showed my son wasn't concern. It was contempt." Karen's lips trembled. Her entire body seemed smaller now, shrinking against the leather seat. She glanced at Malik, then away, as if his gaze burned. Malik's hands finally steadied. He wasn't trembling anymore. For the first time since she had leaned over him, he felt something lift a weight, a shadow replaced by the certainty that he was not alone. David straightened, his voice carrying across the cabin once more. "Let this be clear. First class is not about race, wealth, or pedigree. It is about the price of a ticket, and my son has earned more than just his seat. He's earned respect." The businessman in row 1, the woman in row 3. The passengers scattered through the cabin. They nodded, some murmured agreement, others clapped softly. Karen slumped back, her face pale, her phone buzzing relentlessly in her bag. Already, she knew, the internet would not forget. Malik exhaled, closing his textbook for the first time since boarding. His father's hand on his shoulder was warm, steady, grounding. For the boy, The lesson was etched deep. Dignity was not given. It was claimed. And for Karen, the lesson was only beginning. The applause began tentatively, a few claps echoing through the cabin, then building until it became a wave that rolled from the front of first class all the way to the back of coach. It wasn't the rowdy kind of applause reserved for sports victories or concerts. This was slower, heavier, charged with something deeper: relief, vindication, recognition. Malik sat still, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He felt heat rise in his cheeks, not from embarrassment this time, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being defended so publicly. For 12 years, he had worked to blend in, to be the quiet kid with his math puzzles, to stay out of trouble. But here, in the span of minutes, blending in had become impossible. Karen Whitmore, meanwhile, sat stiff in her seat, her fingers digging into the leather armrest as though she could anchor herself to the world she knew. Her phone continued to vibrate in her purse, but she didn't dare pull it out. She already knew what awaited her texts, news alerts, perhaps even the first trickle of social media tags. The thought made her stomach churn. David Johnson didn't return to his seat immediately. He remained standing, surveying the cabin the way a captain might survey a storm. His calm demeanor never wavered, though beneath it a current of emotions swirled: anger at Karen's audacity, protectiveness toward Malik, but also a sobering awareness of what came next. Once this moment hit the internet, and it surely would, the story would no longer be theirs alone. It would belong to the world. The captain's voice returned, smooth but tinged with caution. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing some light turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. It was almost comical. The sky outside was clear, a deep canvas of blue with only the faintest wisps of clouds. The turbulence wasn't from the air, it was inside the cabin. Thick enough to taste, Margaret O'Connor leaned forward, her voice carrying that blend of age and authority that commanded attention without force. "Mr. Johnson," she said softly, "thank you. Children remember moments like this for the rest of their lives. Your boy will know he's worth standing for." David inclined his head. "Thank you for speaking up before I did. It shouldn't always fall to those of us most affected to carry the weight." She nodded, her lined face solemn. "True, silence is complicity. I've seen that truth too many times, in too many decades." Karen flinched at the word silence. Her ears burned as if the judgment was carved into the air. She wanted to defend herself, to say she wasn't a bad person, just misunderstood, just caught in a moment. But every sentence she rehearsed died in her throat. None of them would undo what the world had already witnessed. Marcus approached carefully. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his professional tone never wavering. "Captain has asked me to remind passengers that disruptive behavior won't be tolerated for the remainder of the flight." His eyes flicked briefly to Karen. David nodded. "Understood." Karen found her voice at last, trembling but audible. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just protecting. Well, I thought—" "No," David interrupted gently. "You thought wrong. And sometimes, Ms. Whitmore, the harm done in a single thoughtless moment outweighs a lifetime of polite words." Her lips quivered. "What happens now?" "That," David said, "is up to you." The rest of the flight settled into a strange rhythm. Some passengers tried to return to their books, their tablets, their conversations. But the energy had shifted permanently. The cabin was no longer just a vessel hurtling through the sky. It was a crucible, and everyone inside had been reshaped by the heat. Malik opened his math workbook again, though he barely saw the numbers. His mind spun with fragments of what had just happened. His father's voice, steady and sure. Ms. O'Connor's support. Karen's face as realization crashed over her. He wondered if he would ever be able to go back to being invisible again, or if invisibility was something he even wanted anymore. Angela Johnson, seated quietly in the next row, reached over and squeezed her son's hand. She hadn't intervened during the confrontation, trusting David's judgment. But now, she leaned close and whispered, "I'm proud of you. You didn't let her words break you." Malik's throat tightened. "I was scared," he admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Angela replied. "It's choosing to stand, even when you're scared." Her words soothed him, but they also sparked something else, a seed of resolve that would grow in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Karen, meanwhile, stared at the seat back in front of her, her mind replaying the confrontation in merciless loops. Each replay sharpened her humiliation. She imagined the videos already spreading across social media, strangers dissecting her tone, her expression, her words. She pictured her co-workers whispering behind closed doors, her daughter finding out, her reputation unraveling strand by strand. For the first time in her life, Karen Whitmore understood what it meant to lose control of a narrative. She had always been the one to define others with sharp comments, subtle exclusions, private judgments. Now, she was the one defined, and the mirror held up to her face was merciless. The plane dipped slightly, the promised turbulence finally arriving. Coffee sloshed in cups. Passengers tightened seat belts. A baby cried softly from the back. But through it all, Malik felt lighter, as though the storm had already passed. When the wheels finally touched down in Washington, D. The applause that broke out wasn't for the pilot's landing. It was for the moment everyone knew had already left the plane and entered the wider world. Phones dinged with notifications clips uploaded, captions written, hashtags forming. Karen remained seated as others rose to collect bags. The walk of shame loomed, and she dreaded it more than anything. She waited until most of first class had filed out, then rose on shaky legs. As she stepped into the aisle, the silence was deafening. Eyes followed her, some cold, some pitying, none forgiving. Malik watched her go, his expression unreadable. Part of him wanted to feel triumph, but another part, the deeper part, only felt tired. He turned to his father. "What happens to her now?" David sighed. "The world will have its say. But remember, Malik, the measure of a person isn't just what happens when they fall. It's what they do after." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand. Not yet. But the lesson settled into him like a stone in a riverbed, shaping the current around it. Steady and unmovable. Outside the terminal, the first flashes of cameras already waited. The world was hungry for a story, and it had just been fed one it would not soon forget. By the time the Johnson family stepped into the terminal at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the moment from row 2 had already escaped the plane and entered the bloodstream of the internet. Clips circulated on TikTok with captions like, "This woman tried to take a kid's seat? Wait till you see who his dad is." On Twitter, hashtags bloomed like wildfire. "Dir is seat 2B. Skyjet CEO. Let the boy sit." Facebook groups replayed the confrontation in loops, each comment thread more heated than the last. David Johnson, though seasoned in the spotlight, felt the shift immediately. Phones were angled their way as they walked through the terminal. Whispers followed them. "That's him. That's the CEO. That's the boy." Malik tugged at the strap of his backpack, wishing the ground would swallow him. He was used to attention in small doses, teachers praising his math scores, family friends marveling at his politeness. But this was different. This was a spotlight so bright it burned. Angela placed a hand on his shoulder. "Head up, Malik. You don't owe anyone shame." He nodded, though his eyes stayed fixed on the floor tiles, counting them like equations. 1, 2, 3, 4. Numbers steadied him. Outside the airport, a black SUV waited to drive them to their hotel. The driver opened the door with deference, already aware of who he was serving. Inside, the leather seats were cool, the windows tinted, but the weight of the world seeped in anyway. Malik pressed his forehead to the glass, watching the city blur past monuments, bustling sidewalks, the dome of the Capitol rising in the distance. In the hotel suite overlooking the Potomac River, David finally exhaled. He loosened his tie, setting it across the arm of a chair. "Well," he said, voice low. "The genie's out of the bottle." Angela turned on the television. Every major network was already running the clip. Anchors debated what it revealed about American society, about privilege, about race in first class. Some spoke with outrage, others with forced neutrality, but all of them used the same image: Malik, sitting stiff-backed in his seat, holding his boarding pass like a shield. Malik winced at the sight. "Why do they have to show my face?" "Because you stood your ground," Angela said gently. "Because people need to see courage, looks like you." "I didn't feel courageous," he whispered. "I felt small." David sat beside him. "That's the thing about courage, son. It often hides inside the smallest moments. The world calls it big only after it's done." They ate dinner in the hotel room, burgers and fries. Malik's favorite, while their phones buzzed endlessly. Messages from friends, colleagues, reporters, requests for interviews, invitations to speak, even threats. Angela turned her phone face down, unwilling to let venom enter their sanctuary. Meanwhile, across the city, Karen Whitmore sat alone in her hotel room, staring at the same clips, her face, her voice, her words immortalized now in the worst way. Every scroll brought fresh humiliation, strangers calling her racist, employers tagged in angry posts, people digging up her LinkedIn profile. She had tried emailing her boss to explain, but the reply was curt. "We'll discuss your employment tomorrow." For the first time in years, Karen wept without the ability to stop herself. The mirror reflected a woman she didn't recognize, smaller, cracked, exposed. Back in the Johnson suite, Malik sat cross-legged on his bed, laptop open. He wasn't on social media much, but tonight he couldn't resist. He scrolled through comments under the hashtag #WarmerSeat2B. Most were supportive. "This kid is a hero. What a father. We need more people like them." But some twisted the narrative, bet the dad only got that seat 'cause of quotas. The kid's just privileged, too. Stop acting like he's a martyr. Malik's chest tightened. He snapped the laptop shut. "Why do they hate me if they don't even know me?" Angela joined him, smoothing his hair. "Because some people are afraid of change, afraid of being wrong. But their hate doesn't define you. Only your choices do." Malik bit his lip. "Do I have to be strong all the time?" David answered from the doorway, his voice soft but firm. "No, Malik, you just have to be true. Strength comes and goes. Truth stays." Night fell over Washington. Outside, the river shimmered with city lights, but inside, the family gathered close, bound tighter than ever by what they had endured. The world's gaze was a heavy crown, but they carried it together. In the quiet, after Angela and Malik drifted to sleep, David stood alone by the window. He stared at the skyline, remembering his own boyhood in Birmingham. The jeers, the locked doors, the endless climb. He had always hoped his son would live in a world a little kinder. Tonight reminded him how far there still was to go, but it also reminded him of something else. Progress didn't always arrive in sweeping legislation or court rulings. Sometimes it arrived in row 2 of a morning flight, carried by the quiet defiance of a boy with a math book. Morning in Washington carried a brisk chill. The streets bustled with commuters, the aroma of coffee and fresh bagels wafting from corner cafes. For most of the city, it was just another weekday. For Malik Johnson, it was the morning he had spent months preparing for. The National Mathematics Competition was held in a stately hall near Georgetown University. Banners lined the entryway, celebrating the brightest young minds in America. Students from across the country streamed inside, clutching backpacks and notebooks, some chatting nervously, others wearing headphones to block out the world. Malik walked between his parents, blazer pressed, lucky pencil tucked in his pocket. He felt every eye on him, not just those of fellow competitors, but of strangers whispering, "That's the kid from the plane." A few parents raised their phones discreetly, snapping photos as though he were a celebrity. Angela leaned down and whispered, "Ignore the cameras. Focus on the numbers. They've always been your friends." Malik nodded, though his palms were damp. Numbers didn't judge, but people did. And today, the two worlds collided. Inside the auditorium, rows of tables stretched beneath chandeliers. Judges in suits shuffled papers. Teachers hushed their teams. The air buzzed with anticipation. Malik found his seat number 14 and set down his notebook. Across from him, a girl with glasses gave him a polite nod. She, too, seemed nervous. The competition began. Equations appeared on the projector, algebraic puzzles, geometry riddles, sequences designed to twist the mind. Malik's pencil flew across the page. His mind settled into the rhythm he loved, the dance of logic, the chase of solutions. For a while, the noise of the world faded. There was only the clarity of math. But even here, whispers followed. Judges exchanged glances, some impressed, others skeptical. Was this boy as brilliant as the viral clip suggested, or was he just another headline, destined to fade? David and Angela watched from the gallery above, hands entwined. David's jaw was tight. He had faced boardrooms filled with doubters, but this watching his son prove himself under the weight of public scrutiny felt heavier than any quarterly report. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Whitmore sat in a sterile conference room at her office. Her manager, a stern man in his 50s, folded his hands. "Karen, we've received dozens of calls. Our PR department is overwhelmed. Clients are threatening to withdraw. This situation has become untenable." Karen's throat was dry. It was a misunderstanding. "I didn't mean intent doesn't erase impact." He cut in, "And the impact has been catastrophic." He slid a paper across the table. "Effective immediately. Your employment is terminated." Her hand shook as she signed. A career built over 2 decades dissolved in a single signature. She gathered her belongings in a cardboard box, each item feeling heavier than it should. Photos of her daughter, trinkets from vacations, a coffee mug with her initials, all relics of a life unraveling. Back at the competition, the final round loomed, a lightning round projected on the big screen. Questions answered aloud. Malik's name was called among the top 5. He walked to the stage, heart hammering, but his steps steady. The moderator smiled politely. "Contestants, Are you ready? Questions flashed. Hands shot up. Answers rang out. Malik's mind raced, but his training held. He solved a geometry proof in seconds. He cracked a number sequence others stumbled on. Applause filled the hall. Then came the final question, an advanced theorem, notorious among mathematicians for its elegance and difficulty. Silence gripped the room. Even the other finalists hesitated. Malik closed his eyes, visualizing the problem like a puzzle unfolding in his mind. His hand rose. His voice, clear and certain, the solution spilled out, step by step, precise and confident. The moderator blinked. That is correct. The audience erupted. Cameras flashed. Judges scribbled furiously, some nodding in awe. Malik stood taller, not because he sought fame, but because in that moment, numbers had once again been his refuge and his victory. David felt his throat tighten. Angela wiped tears discreetly. Their son had not only survived scrutiny, he had thrived under it. As Malik left the stage, a boy from another team whispered, "Hey, you're amazing." It wasn't about the viral clip anymore. It was about Malik's own merit. That night, news outlets carried two stories side by side. Young math prodigy wins national title and woman fired after airline racism incident. The juxtaposition was stark, the symbolism unavoidable. Malik sat on the hotel bed, trophy in his lap. "Dad," he asked softly, "did I win because I'm good at math or because people wanted me to David crouch to meet his son's eyes?" "You won because you earned it. The world may watch, may judge, may twist the story, but numbers don't lie, and neither does the truth of your effort." Malik nodded slowly, the weight of both victory and scrutiny pressing on him. Across town. Karen lay awake in her apartment, the box from her office at her feet. The internet was merciless memes, commentary, even old acquaintances turning against her. She wondered if she would ever rebuild. For the first time, she questioned not just her reputation, but her core. How had she become the villain in a boy's story? The city slept, but the ripple effects of Row 2 stretched wide. Some hearts hardened, others softened, and in the middle of it all, a boy with a lucky pencil carried a trophy and the burden of being more than himself. The morning after the competition, Washington, D.C., woke to headlines splashed across every major outlet. Boy in seat 2B stuns nation with math championship victory. CEO's son wins gold. Racist passenger loses job. Photos of Malik clutching his trophy ran beside stills of Karen Whitmore, her expression frozen mid-confrontation. The Johnsons ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant, but privacy was impossible. Strangers approached their table, some asking for selfies, others offering congratulations. Malik forced polite smiles, but inside, unease gnawed at him. He had won the competition, yet no one asked about the theorem he solved or the hours he had studied. They only asked about the video. "Dad," he whispered, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate. "I don't want to be famous. I just wanted to do math." David set down his coffee, leaning close. "Fame is noise. Malik, what matters is the signal you send through it. You showed the world brilliance and dignity. Don't let the noise drown that out." Angela touched Malik's hand gently. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed. You don't have to carry the world's expectations. Just be you." But outside the glass walls of the restaurant, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions through the revolving doors. Fame wasn't asking permission. It was barging in. Later that day, David held a press conference at Skyjet's Washington office. Reporters packed the room, microphones bristling like a forest. He addressed them with calm precision. What happened on our flight was not just about one passenger and my son. It was about the reality that prejudice still boards planes with us every day. As CEO, I am committed to ensuring SkyJet remains a place where every customer is treated with dignity. As a father, I will not apologize for protecting my child. The applause was swift, but the questions followed just as fast. Mr. Johnson, is SkyJet considering legal action? How is Malik handling the spotlight? Do you believe Karen Whitmore deserves forgiveness? David answered carefully, never letting anger spill. Justice is not about vengeance. It's about truth. What Ms. Whitmore chooses to do now will determine her path forward. Across the city, Karen watched the broadcast alone. Her apartment was dim, blinds drawn, the glow of the television casting shadows across her face. She had avoided opening social media, but curiosity gnawed at her. Finally, she clicked on Twitter. The mentions were brutal insults, jokes, threats. Yet buried beneath the avalanche, a few comments pierced differently. One read, "I hope she learned something. We've all said things we regret. The real test is whether she changes." Karen stared at those words for a long time. Change. Could she, or was her life permanently branded by that one moment? She picked up the phone and called her sister. When the line connected, the voice on the other end was cautious. "Karen, I saw the news. I messed up," Karen admitted, her voice breaking. "I hurt a child. I hurt myself. I don't know how to fix it." Her sister was silent for a moment, then, gently, "Start by admitting it. Not to me, to him." Meanwhile, Malik sat by the hotel window, trophy on the sill beside him. He watched boats cut across the Potomac, the water shimmering under late afternoon light. In his notebook, he scribbled equations, but the numbers refused to comfort him. Each time he wrote, the whispers of strangers intruded. That's the kid, the symbol of dignity, the boy who put racism in its place. He closed the notebook with a sigh. He didn't want to be a symbol. He wanted to be Malik. Angela joined him, curling an arm around his shoulders. "What's on your mind? I don't want people to see me as just that kid from the plane," he murmured. "I want them to see me, for math, for who I am." Angela kissed his temple. "Symbols fade, but character stays. Let the world think what it wants. You'll still be you." That night, as the Johnsons prepared for bed, David checked his email. Dozens of invitations filled his inbox: conferences, interviews, corporate boards wanting him to speak about diversity. He knew the weight of opportunity and exploitation when he saw it. He closed the laptop, unwilling to let ambition steal the quiet his family needed. In another corner of the city, Karen sat at her kitchen table, drafting an apology. She wrote, deleted, rewrote. Nothing felt enough. Finally, she pushed the paper aside, realizing words alone couldn't undo the harm. Action had to follow. But what action? The question loomed like a mountain. She wasn't sure she could climb. The storm raged on in headlines, hashtags, debates on morning shows. But inside two separate homes, two lives wrestled with the same truth. One moment on a plane had changed everything. For Malik, the question was how to live beyond the symbol. For Karen, the question was whether she could live beyond the shame. The Johnsons returned to Atlanta 2 days later, weary from travel and the unrelenting attention. Their gated neighborhood, once quiet, now had satellite trucks parked at every corner. Security guards waved them through while reporters shouted questions at the entrance. Malik leaned against the car window, watching the circus outside. "It feels like we're animals in a zoo," he muttered. Angela reached back to squeeze his hand. "You're not an animal, baby. You're a boy who deserves peace. This noise will fade." But Malik wasn't so sure. Inside the house, the phone rang nonstop. Friends called to offer support. Strangers called with both praise and venom. David had instructed the staff to filter messages, but some slipped through. Malik overheard one voicemail, a voice dripping with contempt. "Keep your kid in his place. He doesn't belong up there with the rest of us." The word stabbed deeper than Malik let on. He retreated to his room, opened his math notebook, and stared at a blank page. Numbers usually offered refuge, but tonight, even equations felt hollow. Downstairs, David paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear. "No, I don't want another interview," he said firmly. "My family needs space. If people want a statement, they already have one." He ended the call and exhaled, the weight of responsibility pressing hard. Angela placed a hand on his shoulder. "He's carrying too much. David, he's 12. He shouldn't feel like the world is watching his every step." "I know," David admitted, "but the world is watching, and I don't know how to shield him without making him feel small." That same night, across town, Karen sat in the fellowship hall of a church she hadn't attended in years. She had asked the pastor for a private meeting. Tears streaked her cheeks as she confessed, "I humiliated that boy. I didn't even see him as a child. I saw everything I was afraid of, and now the whole world hates me." The pastor listened quietly before speaking. "Karen, shame is heavy. But repentance isn't about escaping shame. It's about transforming it into something different. What are you willing to do for that boy? Not for your reputation, but for his dignity." Karen swallowed hard. "Anything. But I don't even know where to start." The pastor gave her a number. "Start by writing to his family. Not an email, not a tweet. A letter. Something from your hand, so they know you've thought about every word." Karen nodded, though her hands trembled. Could a letter possibly bridge a chasm this wide? The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope to the Johnson home. The handwriting on the front was shaky, but deliberate. For the Johnson family. David almost tossed it aside, thinking it was another piece of fan mail or hate mail. But something about the uneven pen strokes made him pause. He opened it slowly, unfolding several pages. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, and especially Malik, I don't know if you'll ever read this, and I don't deserve for you to, but I need to say it anyway. What I did on that plane was cruel. I saw your son not as the brilliant boy he is, but as a threat to my sense of superiority. I spoke words that should never have been spoken. I humiliated him. And in doing so, I humiliated myself. The world now sees me as a villain. But that isn't the punishment that hurts most. What hurts is knowing I left scars on a child's heart. Malik, if you're reading this, I am sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I will spend the rest of my life trying to unlearn the poison that made me act that way. If there is ever a way I can repair even a fraction of the harm I caused, please tell me. Until then, I will listen, I will learn, and I will face the consequences. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore." David read the letter twice, then handed it to Angela, her lips pressed together as she scanned the words. "It sounds sincere," she admitted, "but sincerity doesn't erase the harm." Malik entered the room, sensing the tension. "What's that?" Angela hesitated, then handed him the letter. He read it silently, his young brow furrowing. When he finished, he set it down. "She says she's sorry." David studied his son. "How do you feel about that?" Malik shrugged, though his voice wavered. "I don't know. Part of me wants to tear it up. Another part, I guess I wanted to hear her say it. But sorry doesn't change what she did." Angela pulled him close. "You don't have to forgive her. Malik, not now. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness is your choice, not her right." That evening, Malik wrote in his journal. His words spilled out faster than equations ever did. "Everyone wants me to be strong, to be a symbol, but I just want to be a kid who likes math. I don't know if forgiving her makes me stronger or weaker. I don't know if not forgiving makes me bitter. I just know I'm tired of being the lesson in someone else's story." Meanwhile, Karen waited in silence. Every day felt heavier, every headline harsher. But she kept going to the church, kept listening, kept reflecting. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to defend herself. She was trying to change. For Malik, the struggle was just beginning. The world saw him as an icon of grace. But inside, he wrestled with questions far older than his years. What does it mean to forgive? And what does it mean to protect yourself from those who hurt you? The invitation came from an unlikely place. A local community center in Atlanta was hosting a panel on racial healing and reconciliation. The organizers had asked David Johnson to speak. At first, he declined. His family had endured enough spotlight. But after long conversations with Angela, and even Malik, he reconsidered. "This isn't about publicity," Angela reminded him one night as they sat on the porch. "It's about showing Malik, and others like him, that healing isn't just an idea. It's work. Sometimes painful work." David finally agreed. The night of the event, the center buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors, activists, students, even city officials filled the folding chairs. Cameras were not allowed. This wasn't about spectacle. Malik sat between his parents, notebook in his lap. He wasn't sure if he would write equations or feelings tonight. When the panel began, David spoke with measured power. "As a father, I was furious that my son had to endure humiliation on a flight where he should have felt safe. As a CEO, I know prejudice doesn't just live on planes. It lives in boardrooms, schools, neighborhoods. But as a man, I believe growth is possible. Accountability is the first step. Change is the second." The audience nodded, some wiping tears. Malik felt pride, but also the familiar heaviness of being a symbol. He wanted to sink into the chair and just be invisible. Then came the surprise. The moderator announced a final guest, Ms. Karen Whitmore. The room stiffened. All eyes turned as Karen walked slowly onto the stage. She looked smaller than Malik remembered. Her once perfect posture had collapsed into something humbler, almost fragile. She clutched no designer bag, wore no polished suit, just a simple blouse and slacks. Her hair pulled back. Malik's stomach clenched. His pencil slipped from his fingers, clattering against the floor. Karen took the microphone with trembling hands. "I know many of you don't want me here. Maybe I shouldn't be. But I asked to come because silence won't heal what I broke. I humiliated a boy on that flight, a boy who had every right to his seat. I saw his skin before I saw his humanity, and I was wrong." Her voice cracked, and for a moment she seemed to lose her breath. "People ask if I'm sorry because of the backlash, the job I lost, the shame. The truth is, I'm sorry because I hurt a child. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I came here to face him anyway." The room was quiet. Malik's chest tightened. Every eye shifted toward him. He felt the weight of expectation again, the question hovering. Would he forgive Angela, placed a hand on his knee. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," she whispered. Malik swallowed hard. He stood slowly, surprising even himself. His small figure walked toward the microphone. He could feel the room holding its breath. He stared at Karen. Her eyes, once sharp with disdain, now glistened with tears. "You made me feel like I didn't belong," Malik said, his voice shaking but clear. "You made me feel small in front of strangers. I still remember every word." Karen lowered her gaze. "I know." Malik's fist clenched at his sides. "And part of me wants to stay angry, because being angry feels safer. But I don't want to carry you with me forever. I want to carry math problems, chess strategies, good memories with my family, not you." Gas rippled through the audience. Malik continued, his voice gaining strength. "So I'm not forgiving you to make you feel better. I'm forgiving you so I can feel free. Free from you. Free from that day." Karen's tears fell openly now. She whispered, "Thank you," though she knew the forgiveness was not absolution. It was release. Malik turned back to his seat, his heart pounding. He sat down, burying his face in Angela's shoulder. The room erupted in applause, not for Karen, but for Malik's courage. After the panel ended, Karen approached quietly. David stood protectively, his presence imposing. But Malik looked up and surprised them all. "Can I ask her one question?" David hesitated, then nodded. Malik faced Karen. "Do you have kids?" Her lips trembled. "Yes, a daughter. About your age." "Then promise me something," Malik said firmly. "Teach her better than what you showed me." Karen nodded, unable to speak. Malik turned away, finally feeling lighter. That night, as they drove home, Malik stared out the window at the Atlanta skyline glowing in the dark. "Dad," he said softly, "was that the right thing to do?" David glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "There isn't always a right or wrong, son. There's just what helps you live with yourself. And tonight, you chose freedom over bitterness. That takes strength." Angela squeezed Malik's hand. "And grace." For the first time in weeks, Malik smiled. A small smile, but real. The morning after the community panel, the Johnson family woke up to headlines. Though no cameras had been allowed inside, word spread quickly. Attendees posted accounts online, describing Malik's powerful words. Someone even recorded audio on a phone, despite the ban. By dawn, clips of Malik's trembling but steady voice were circulating across social media. "You made me feel small in front of strangers, but I won't carry you with me forever." Those lines were quoted on Twitter, turned into inspirational graphics on Instagram, replayed in commentary videos on YouTube. For some, Malik became a hero. For others, the story reopened old wounds. Angela scrolled through reactions on her phone while sipping coffee, her brows knitted. "People are already fighting in the comments," she muttered. David set down the newspaper. "Of course they are. Forgiveness is always controversial. Some see it as strength, others as surrender." Malik wandered into the kitchen, still groggy. "Why are they talking about me again? I thought the panel was supposed to be small." David sighed. "Son, when words are that powerful, they travel whether we want them to or not." Malik pushed a spoon around his cereal. "I don't like being famous. I just wanted to be heard in that room, not everywhere." Angela kissed the top of his head. "I know, baby. But sometimes the world hears what it needs, even if you weren't trying to shout." That week brought invitations from national talk shows, civil rights groups, even universities. Malik received hundreds of letters from children around the country, some thanking him, some telling their own stories of humiliation. One letter came from a boy in Chicago who had been stopped by security while entering a math competition. Another from a girl in Mississippi whose teacher refused to believe she wrote her own essay. Malik read them silently in his room, his chest tightening. He felt connected to these kids, but also overwhelmed. "I can't fix everything," he whispered into the quiet. Meanwhile, Karen's life spiraled further. News outlets picked up her panel appearance. Some praised her honesty. Others dismissed it as damage control. Outside her small apartment, protesters sometimes gathered, holding signs that read, "No excuses and racism has consequences." Inside, Karen struggled with guilt and despair. She had lost her corporate job months earlier. Friends had distanced themselves, and her daughter Emma hardly spoke to her. She replayed Malik's words constantly. "Teach her better than what you showed me." It haunted her, but also gave her a sliver of purpose. She enrolled in therapy, joined a racial bias workshop, and began volunteering quietly at a literacy program in a black neighborhood. But the public wasn't ready to forgive. Online, her name trended with hashtags filled with anger. She stopped checking her phone. She stopped leaving home except to volunteer. Each step toward change felt invisible compared to the enormity of her mistake. One evening, David received a call from the Skyjet board. The chairman's voice was tense. "David, some shareholders are concerned. Your presence at that panel, standing across from Ms. Whitmore, it complicates our brand image. Some say compassion looks weak." David leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights outside his office window. What complicates our image is pretending prejudice isn't real. Our customers don't want silence. They want integrity. There was a pause on the line. "Just be aware. Not everyone on the board shares your view." David hung up, feeling the old tug-of-war between leadership and morality. Running an airline was about profits and planes, but leading as a father was about dignity. He wondered if the two could truly coexist. At home, Malik wrestled with his own burden. His classmates treated him differently now. Some admired him, others mocked him, whispering celebrity in the hallways. Teachers asked him to speak in assemblies, something he dreaded. He wanted to disappear into equations, not speeches. One night, unable to sleep, Malik sat by his window, staring at the moon. Angela found him there. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently. Malik's voice was quiet. "What if I didn't say the right thing? What if forgiving her was wrong?" Angela sat beside him. "Forgiveness isn't about right or wrong. It's about what you needed. You freed yourself from her grip. That's enough. But people are angry at me for letting her off easy," Malik admitted. "What if they're right?" Angela pulled him into a hug. "Listen to me. You didn't forgive to make her comfortable. You forgave to make yourself whole. That's strength, not weakness." Malik closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. Yet doubts lingered like shadows. The turning point came a week later, when Skyjet hosted its annual youth outreach event at a downtown convention center. Dozens of kids from underserved communities attended, exploring careers in aviation and STEM. David was scheduled to speak, and Malik reluctantly agreed to join him. As father and son walked onto the stage, the room erupted in cheers. Malik froze, nervous, until David placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Just tell them who you are," David whispered. Malik stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at rows of eager faces, kids who looked like him, kids who didn't, all waiting. His voice trembled at first, but grew steady. "I'm Malik. I love math. I get nervous in crowds. And sometimes People make me feel like I don't belong. But I'm here anyway. And so are you. That means we do belong." The applause was thunderous. Malik smiled shyly, a spark of pride warming him. For the first time, he felt his voice could lift others instead of weighing him down. Afterward, a small girl approached him with wide eyes. "I want to be a pilot," she said, "but people tell me girls can't fly planes." Malik knelt to her level. "They told me I didn't belong in first class. We both know they were wrong. So let's prove them wrong again." The girl grinned, and Malik realized maybe his story wasn't just a burden. Maybe it was a bridge. That night, David watched Malik sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. He whispered to Angela, "He's carrying more than any child should. But maybe he's carrying it with grace." Angela nodded, her eyes soft. "And maybe that's what will change the world." Karen Whitmore sat at her kitchen table late into the night. Unpaid bills scattered like fallen leaves. Her savings had dwindled after months of unemployment. She had applied for dozens of jobs, but every interview ended the same. The moment they Googled her name, the tone shifted. A polite smile, a quick excuse, and silence. Her daughter, Emma, sat across the room doing homework. The once bright chatter between them had faded into quiet tension. Emma had become distant, embarrassed at school, bullied online because of her mother's infamy. "Mom," Emma said softly, not looking up from her notebook, "when will this all stop?" Karen's chest ached. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise I'm trying." Emma's eyes flicked up, uncertain. Trying isn't enough when people think you're a monster. Karen bit her lip, tears threatening. Her daughter's words cut deeper than the cruelest headline. Desperate. Karen returned to the community center where she had faced Malik weeks earlier. She asked the director if she could volunteer. He hesitated, her name carried baggage, but finally relented, assigning her to sort donated clothes in the basement. At first, other volunteers eyed her warily. Whispers followed her down hallways. But Karen showed up day after day. Folding shirts, sweeping floors, scrubbing bathrooms. She didn't complain, didn't defend herself. Slowly, suspicion turned to curiosity. One evening, a young volunteer approached her. "Why do you keep coming back? Aren't you embarrassed?" Karen looked at her calloused hands. "Because shame can either bury you or teach you. I don't want to be buried." The girl studied her, then gave a small nod. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. Meanwhile, Malik's life took on a different rhythm. He returned to school, still facing stares and whispers, but he had begun to find strength in them. When teachers invited him to speak at assemblies, he no longer resisted. He talked honestly about fear, about humiliation, about choosing freedom over bitterness. His words resonated. Students who once mocked him now approached to share their own struggles, being underestimated, bullied, dismissed. Malik realized he wasn't just carrying his story, he was carrying theirs too. At dinner one night, Malik said, "Dad, Mom, maybe being a symbol isn't all bad. If people see themselves in me, maybe it helps them feel less alone." Angela smiled, pride shining in her eyes. David nodded slowly. "Just remember, son, you're still a boy. You deserve to live your own life, too. Don't let the world steal that from you." Still, David couldn't ignore the mounting pressure at Skyjet. Some investors accused him of politicizing the airline. Others demanded he capitalize on the publicity with flashy campaigns. David refused. "We won't use pain for profit," he told the board firmly. The tension grew, but so did his resolve. Back in Karen's world, The consequences deepened. Emma was suspended after a fight at school. Another student had mocked her mother, and Emma lashed out. Sitting in the principal's office, Karen listened as Emma sobbed. "They'll never let me forget what you did." Karen hugged her tightly. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you and to them that I can change. I can't erase what I did, but I can live differently from now on." Later that week, Karen attended a workshop on racial bias. At first, she sat in silence, arms crossed, defensive. But as she listened to stories of daily discrimination, stories that mirrored what she had done to Malik, her defenses crumbled. A black mother described her son being followed in stores. A teenager described being pulled over for fitting a description. Karen raised her hand, voice trembling. "I did that. I was that person on the plane. And I don't know how to forgive myself." The room was quiet. Then the facilitator said gently, "Forgiveness isn't where you start. Responsibility is. Keep showing up, keep learning, keep serving. That's where change begins." For the first time, Karen felt a path forward. Not easy, not short, but possible. Back in Atlanta, Malik prepared for a televised interview with a respected journalist. He was nervous, but David reminded him, "Speak your truth. That's all anyone can ask." On air, Malik spoke plainly. "I didn't forgive Ms. Whitmore to make her feel better. I forgave her because I didn't want to carry her anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I get to choose what I carry." The interviewer leaned in. "And what do you choose to carry now?" Malik smiled softly. "Math problems, hope, and the belief that kids like me deserve every seat we sit in." The clip went viral again, but this time Malik felt lighter. He wasn't trapped by the narrative, he was shaping it. At the same time, Karen watched from her apartment, tears streaming down her face. She whispered, "Thank you, Malik, not for forgiving her, but for showing her what real accountability looked like." For both Malik and Karen, the journey was far from over. But for the first time, their paths, though scarred and painful, were bending towards something greater than either could have imagined transformation. By early spring, the frenzy around Malik had shifted. The headlines were fewer, but his name still carried weight. Instead of shrinking from it, Malik began to use the attention differently. His school invited him to lead a new mentorship club for younger students. At first, Malik hesitated. He was only 12 himself, but when he saw third and fourth graders lining up eagerly outside the classroom, eyes wide with admiration, he realized they weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for someone who understood. During the first meeting, Malik stood at the whiteboard, chalk in hand. "This isn't just about math," he told them. "It's about not letting people tell you what you can't do." A small boy raised his hand timidly. "But what if they say it every day?" Malik paused. He thought about the voices he still heard in his head, about Karen's words that once burned like fire. "Then you fight with proof. You show them by being you. It won't make the pain disappear, but it will make you stronger." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling in. Malik realized that for the first time, he wasn't speaking for cameras or crowds. He was speaking for kids who needed hope. Meanwhile, David wrestled with challenges at Skyjet. The airline faced protests from activists demanding deeper commitments to diversity. While some investors pressured him to move on from the controversy, David stood firm. He introduced new training programs, scholarships for aspiring black pilots, and stricter anti-discrimination policies. Angela noticed the toll on him one night as he rubbed his temples over stacks of reports. "You're carrying the company in this family," she said softly. "Don't forget to carry yourself, too." David smiled tiredly. "Sometimes it feels like the whole world is waiting to see if I'll slip. But when I look at Malik, I remember why I can't." Across town, Karen's journey reached a breaking point. After months of quiet volunteer work, she was invited to speak at a neighborhood forum on accountability. She almost refused the thought of standing in front of strangers again made her stomach twist. But Emma surprised her. "Mom," Emma said, "if you're serious about changing, you have to show people. You can't just hide." Karen took a deep breath and agreed. The night of the forum, she stood nervously at the podium, facing a crowd that included many who knew her only as the woman from the plane. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen began slowly. "I know who you think I am, and you're not wrong. I was the woman who looked at a boy and saw something less than human. I spoke words that revealed ugliness in me I didn't even know I had. I can't undo that. But I can tell you what I've done since." She recounted her months of volunteer work, her workshops, her nights of shame. She didn't excuse herself. She exposed herself. "If you're waiting for me to say I deserve forgiveness, I won't. I don't. What I'm asking is to be allowed to keep trying. For my daughter, for myself, for the boy I hurt." The room was quiet. Then a man in the back stood up. "Words are easy. Action is hard. Keep showing up, and maybe we'll believe you." Karen nodded. "That's fair." Emma watched from the front row, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she saw her mother not as the villain the world mocked, but as a flawed person fighting to rise again. In the weeks that followed, Karen doubled her efforts. She helped organize book drives, tutored children in reading, even partnered with a local nonprofit to fundraise for scholarships. The work was exhausting, often thankless, but it grounded her. She wasn't erasing her past. She was rewriting her present. Back in Malik's world, his mentorship club grew. He began inviting guest speakers, pilots, scientists, even his father to inspire the kids. Each session ended with Malik reminding them, "Don't let the world shrink you. Take up your space." One afternoon, after the club, Malik sat alone in the empty classroom, doodling equations in his notebook. Margaret O'Connor, the retired teacher who had defended him on the plane, stopped by. "You've come a long way, young man," she said warmly. Malik smiled shyly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending to be braver than I am." Margaret patted his shoulder. "That's what courage is doing. It's scared. And you, Malik Johnson, are teaching more than math. You're teaching resilience." Malik thought about her words all the way home. Maybe he didn't choose to be a symbol, but maybe he could choose what kind of symbol he became. That evening, as the family ate dinner, Malik looked up suddenly. "Dad, Mom, do you think people can really change?" David set down his fork. "Considering change is possible, but it's slow, and it takes work." "Why do you ask?" Malik shrugged. "I was just thinking about her. About Ms. Whitmore." Angela leaned forward. "What about her?" Malik hesitated. "I don't know if I'll ever forget what she did. But I think maybe she's trying. And if she can change, maybe other people can too." David exchanged a glance with Angela. It was a heavy truth for a 12-year-old, but also a hopeful one. That night, Malik wrote in his journal again. His words came steady, more certain than before. "Being a symbol doesn't mean I have to carry everyone's expectations. It means I can carry hope, and maybe hope is enough." Spring turned to early summer in Atlanta, and with it came an unexpected storm. Skyjet Airlines announced plans for a major youth STEM initiative, inspired partly by Malik's story. The event was to be held at the city's convention center, drawing students, families, and community leaders from across the state. For weeks, Malik prepared to give a short speech alongside his father. He practiced in front of the mirror, trying to balance confidence with honesty. But the closer the event came, the heavier the pressure felt. Every rehearsal reminded him that he wasn't just speaking for himself, he was speaking for countless kids who saw him as proof that they, too, could belong. The day of the event, banners stretched across the convention hall. Skyjet Future Voices building. Tomorrow. Together. The crowd was massive, larger than Malik had ever faced. Rows of seats filled with students in bright t-shirts, teachers guiding them in groups, parents watching proudly. David delivered the opening remarks, steady and charismatic. At Skyjet, we believe every child deserves the chance to soar, not just in planes, but in life. Tonight, you'll hear from my son, Malik, a boy who has taught me more about courage than I ever imagined. Applause thundered. Malik stepped onto the stage, heart pounding. He adjusted the microphone, his small figure dwarfed by the vast hall. "Hi, I'm Malik," he began, voice wavering before steadying. "I love math. I love puzzles. And I believe that kids like us, no matter where we come from, no matter what people think when they see us, we all deserve a seat at the table. Or in my case, a seat on the plane." Laughter rippled warmly through the crowd. Malik smiled, encouraged. "What happened to me was painful. But what I learned is this. We don't have to carry other people's hate. We can carry hope instead." The hall erupted in cheers. Malik's shoulders relaxed, pride glowing in his chest. For once, the spotlight didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift. But outside the convention center, protesters gathered. Some carried signs praising Malik and Skyjet. Others held banners accusing the airline of exploiting tragedy for profit. Among them, a few held placards with Karen Whitmore's face crossed out in red. Inside, Karen sat quietly in the back row. She hadn't been invited, but she had slipped in, determined to listen. She wanted to see the boy she had wronged, not as a symbol plastered on screens, but as a living, breathing child. After Malik's speech, she approached a group of parents handing out flyers about racial equity workshops. One mother recognized her instantly. "You have some nerve showing up here," the woman hissed. "You humiliated that boy. And now you want to piggyback on his moment." Karen's face flushed. "I'm not here for me. I'm here to support." But the murmurs spread quickly. Soon a small crowd surrounded her, voices sharp, demanding she leave. "You don't belong here," someone shouted. Security moved in, ready to escort her out. Panic rose in Karen's chest. Was she destined to be chased from every space forever? But before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Wait!" It was Malik, standing near the edge of the stage. He had seen the commotion, his eyes locked on Karen. For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then Malik spoke, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "She did hurt me. She made me feel small. But tonight isn't about her. Tonight is about kids like us. If she wants to sit and listen, let her. Don't give her power by making this moment about hate again." The crowd murmured in surprise. Security hesitated, then stepped back. Karen's eyes filled with tears. She mouthed, "Thank you," though she knew Malik's words weren't absolution. They were boundaries. The event continued, energy restored. Students lined up to shake Malik's hand. Teachers thanked David and Angela. Reporters scribbled notes. Yet the image that lingered in everyone's minds was not just Malik's speech, but the moment he diffused a storm with dignity far beyond his years. That night at home, Malik collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. "Why does it always have to be me?" he groaned. Angela brushed his curls gently. "Because you carry something rare. Baby, grace, and the world needs it," David added softly. "But grace doesn't mean you have to save everyone. Remember that." Meanwhile, Karen walked home under the streetlights, shaken but strangely steady. For the first time, she realized her redemption wasn't about public acceptance. It was about persistence. She could be shouted down, humiliated again and again, but as long as she kept showing up with humility, maybe one day her actions would speak louder than her past. She thought of Malik's words. Don't give her power by making this moment about hate again. For years, she had lived off power, the false kind that came from status, from skin, from superiority. Now she was learning a different kind, the power of surrender, of service, of listening, and maybe, just maybe, that power could build something new. The summer evening air in Atlanta carried a sweetness, heavy with the scent of magnolias and distant barbecue smoke. Malik sat on the back porch of their home, legs dangling off the steps, a notebook balanced on his knees. He was supposed to be sketching equations for a summer math program, but instead he was doodling airplanes, each one soaring higher than the last. David joined him, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. He set one beside his son. "Not math tonight?" he asked gently. Malik shook his head. "I needed a break. Everyone keeps telling me I'm brave, that I inspire them. But sometimes I just want to be normal." David took a long sip of lemonade before answering. "Normal is overrated. But I hear you." He paused, watching fireflies spark in the dusk. "You know, when I was your age, I just wanted to fit in too. But the truth is, fitting in never changes the world. Standing out does." Malik was quiet. Then he whispered, "But standing out is lonely." David placed a strong hand on his son's shoulder. "It doesn't have to be. You've got allies, people who stood up for you on that plane, people who cheered for you at the event, and you've got us. Always." The screen door creaked as Angela stepped out, holding a small envelope. "This came in today," she said, handing it to Malik. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a letter written in neat handwriting. "Dear Malik, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying. I've started volunteering at a literacy program in my neighborhood. Last week, I helped a young boy who reminded me of you. His smile made me realize how much damage my words could cause, and how much healing kindness can bring. I may never undo what I did, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to balance the scales. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore." Malik stared at the letter, conflicted. "Do you think she really means it?" Angela answered softly. "That's not for us to decide. Change is messy. But if she's working to make the world better, that's something." Malik folded the letter and tucked it into his notebook. "I don't hate her anymore. I don't want to carry that weight." The next week, the Johnson family flew to New York for a board meeting and a quiet family trip. For the first time since the incident, Malik boarded a Skyjet plane without fear gnawing at his chest. The crew greeted him warmly, some whispering that they'd seen the viral video, others simply treating him like any other passenger. This time, Malik sat by the window, gazing at the runway as the engines roared. When the plane lifted, his stomach fluttered not with dread, but with wonder. He still loved flying. No ugly words could take that from him. During the flight, Angela leaned over. "You know, Next year, you'll be old enough to apply for the summer program at MIT. They reached out again. Malik smiled shyly. I'll think about it, but maybe I'll also try baseball, just to be a kid for a while. David chuckled. Memite and baseball, that's a good balance. When they landed at JFK, reporters were waiting, as they often were now. Malik sighed, but held his head high. He had learned to walk through flashing cameras with quiet dignity, focusing on his family's footsteps beside him. Later, strolling through Central Park, Malik spotted children of every shade chasing bubbles, laughing without care. For a moment, he wished he could join them. Then he realized he could. He sprinted forward, laughing, catching bubbles mid-air. Angela and David watched, smiling, knowing their son was still a boy first, before anything else. That night, after Malik fell asleep in the hotel room, David and Angela talked quietly. "He's strong," Angela said, "but he's still carrying so much." David nodded. "We can't protect him from every hurt, but we can make sure he never faces it alone." Meanwhile, across the city, Karen sat in her small apartment. Her world had shrunk. No more lavish luncheons, no more exclusive invites, but in its place, something unexpected had bloomed. She was helping children read, tutoring teens for college, listening more than she spoke. Each day, a little more of her armor cracked, and a little more light seeped in. Sometimes, she still faced glares in the grocery store or whispers on the subway, but she accepted them as reminders. Change wasn't about comfort. It was about accountability. Months passed. Malik excelled at his math program and also played baseball, surprising everyone, including himself, by being pretty good at it. The balance of brilliance and boyhood steadied him. At Skyjet headquarters, David pushed for stronger diversity programs, citing not just corporate responsibility, but personal conviction. His board, moved by the incident and inspired by Malik's grace, voted unanimously. The story of the boy in seat 2A became more than a viral moment. It became part of corporate training, school lessons, even dinner table conversations. Families debated what they would have done in that cabin, who they wanted to be silent witness or active ally. And as time moved forward, Malik's life became less about that one painful flight and more about the flights he chose for himself. College, inventions, maybe even piloting one day. Years later, when asked in an interview about the viral video, Malik, now Dr. Malik Johnson, a pioneer in quantum computing, smiled and said, "That day taught me something simple but powerful. Dignity isn't given, it's carried. And when people stand together against prejudice, no one can take it away." He kept one photo framed on his desk, not of the confrontation, but of himself walking through the airport beside his father and mother, heads held high. To him, that was the real legacy, not the hate he faced, but the love that carried him through it. As for Karen, she lived quietly but faithfully, dedicating her life to service. People still remembered her mistake, but over time, they also remembered her efforts to change. And while not everyone forgave her, she learned that forgiveness wasn't the end goal. Living differently was. In the end, the story of that flight wasn't just about humiliation or power. It was about transformation, the kind that begins in pain, but blooms into something far greater. And for Malik, every time he looked at the sky, it wasn't a reminder of prejudice anymore. It was a reminder of possibility. Life often teaches us through the quiet moments of confrontation, when prejudice appears in an everyday place, like a seat on an airplane. The story of Malik Johnson reminds us that dignity is not granted by others. It is something we carry within ourselves. Yet dignity grows stronger when it is defended by friends, strangers, or even those who simply choose not to remain silent. For older generations, this story echoes memories of battles already fought, civil rights marches, moments when fairness was not guaranteed but demanded. It reminds us that progress is never finished. Each encounter with injustice offers a chance to affirm what kind of person we choose to be. The lesson is simple, yet profound. We cannot always control how others see us, but we can always control how we stand, how we speak, and how we treat those around us. A kind word, a protective gesture, a refusal to accept cruelty. These are the choices that shape not only our character, but the future of those who come after us. Thank you for taking the time to share this journey with us. Stories like this remind us how powerful compassion, dignity, and courage can be in the face of prejudice. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to light, and together, we can keep the conversation about justice and humanity alive.